Alright, we are recording for chapter 18 of the motion picture novelization. I don't really, well, yeah, I don't care much for this chapter, but mainly I think it could have done with an editing pass. It is the kind of thing where it's like, some of the stuff, it's just like, yeah, whatever, kind of neutral. But some of it is like, wait, this doesn't quite make sense. I feel we could do this better. Hopefully I remember to say that when we get to the points. But, one thing it does near the beginning that it's a style thing, and I just don't like the style. So this is they're no longer under attack as the end of the previous chapter, and Kirk has ordered that the scanners and deflectors be turned up to full. Previously they'd been on minimum power, so as not to be confused for some kind of attack or other invasion of privacy. Excuse me. Okay, but then we get to tension. Literally, that's how it starts. Like the highlight here, more so in the middle of the page, starts just single word sentence, tension. I don't like this style. I don't, especially because it's not been used previously in this story. It was just to set the mood. It's just tension. It's like, okay, why don't you tell us about this tension instead of just saying tension? I just, if it were the general style for the story, that would be different. But that's not it. It's not like there was, I'm trying to think what would be a good word. I'm just saying like concern or haste or something like that. Something like that for when they were working to get the Enterprise ready. No, nothing like that. Nothing to just declare what the mood is. It was just described. So yeah, it's tension. Except for Spock, every eye in the bridge was on the viewer in the hope that green death would not appear out of all this loveliness. Because it's describing the appearance of the cloud. By the way, going back a bit to what I was saying about how some of this I didn't care for and feel an editing pass would help. Some of that is also going to be because I have the benefit of a lot of years of scientific development. Like, there is one concept that describes what's like, we actually have that. And you're talking about it being theoretical still for Star Trek. It's like, technically what you're describing does exist today. So, yeah. Does also mention one thing here. Did I? Okay, yeah, I should mention that first. It does. He turns on the navigational sensors because it does recognize that the cloud is large enough to hide a star and planets. So I do appreciate the fact that Roddenberry was aware of that when he was talking about it being 82 AU across, how massive that is. So I do appreciate that. I'm still wondering what's going to happen when we get to the point of V'ger approaching Earth, because at minimum the cloud would have to dissipate or Earth is in the cloud. Okay, so yeah, and then the thing I spotted here, it says that they've been sending high-speed lingo code transmissions explaining all this, to try to explain that did this trying to navigate safely in the cloud, nothing harmful. It's like, why would you think it understands that? Like, you only just figured out about the whole, okay, we need to be at high frequency, and it's not made any response of any kind, except for stopping the attack. That's it. Which is, that could just be this is a familiar, this is an intelligent life form that I'm dealing with. So don't just swat it away. It doesn't necessarily mean that, because I talked about before, like with high sort of molecular structures, speed of light, it's like, okay, so here. Got a pocket dictionary here. That would be as though just walking up to somebody I don't know and to tell them that I'm not a threat to them, just saying glass blowing. Just minority catalyst. It's like they're gonna be like, do we need to call somebody for you? Like, what does it do aside from you can talk? Well, that you can say something. That doesn't mean you have an understanding of the meaning. Yeah. It's Thor's Chariot, Stargate SG-1, I like that better. So that involves the Asgard have left on this planet the Hall of Thor's Might, which has various tests in there to determine if the people have advanced enough that they would be ready to comprehend the Asgard as they actually are. So these holograms as what you stereotypically think a Viking god would look like, but instead the Roswell Greys that the Asgard actually are. But among those things is actually, and it's funny if you look at the trivia, it doesn't actually make any sense, but regardless, written on the wall is the first so many digits of pi, and it's like once they realize that, then it's like, oh, okay, well, here's a circle that, well, there's different shapes that seems like a heart and sand in there, and it's like, okay, well, pi is a ratio for the radius to the circumference, so, and they just drag down a line to mark out the radius, and then the sand drains away, because obviously instead of it being on a wall, they just had it like this, and just once Amanda Tapping reached out and did that, it just opened up chutes or something, so the sand would drain away, revealing a crystal-like thing that they do put their hands on, they do touch, or maybe they do push it, but then that activates a live transmission, and you see Thor himself. And it's like, that makes sense, where it's like, okay, it's two-way communication. That's the thing here with, it's like you're just broadcasting random stuff, well, seemingly random stuff. Yes. It's like, yeah, sure, I know what pi is. That doesn't mean I understand any significance to why you're telling me this. Whereas in that episode of Stargate SG-1, it is significant, because it's like, okay, we figure that the Asgard are like, okay, if they understand pi, then they likely also understand, that they will likely be able to comprehend that this is our true form, that we don't actually look like you, but hey, we're still friends. Nothing wrong with that, right? It's like that makes sense. That's reasonable. I'm good with that. But I just First Contact. Not that this is well, technically it is. They don't know it is First Contact with Reacher. It is one of those things where I do feel that in some cases in science fiction, not that I know every case, but it seems pretty poorly managed. And by that I mean mainly when it is like this, where it seems very one way, not two way. And I don't think it should be that complicated to understand. But to be fair, there's not been that many experiences of First Contact for humans. And the most recent, on a large scale that we'd be aware of, would be First Contact of Europeans with the American Indians, which some of them was very weird. Okay, I mean, it's like, it's funny, one thing I read talking about the actual experience of Columbus meeting, I don't remember which tribe it was, but they were so undeveloped that, for one thing, they went around nude. They didn't have clothing. They had no real understanding of the Europeans. They were peaceful enough, at least for what they met, but it's also one of those things where apparently the history of that people was, so many generations before they eradicated the people that had been living in that location, so they weren't actually completely peaceful, they just were peaceful with the Europeans at the time. But one thing that they also did, because they recognized the Europeans were strong and mighty, and it's like, hey, let's be friends, so here are these two kids you can take aboard your ship and do whatever you want to. Yeah, it's very weird and disturbing, the stuff that actually happened. So, but it's like, it's still, there was interaction there. And by the way, Christopher Columbus was like, thank you, go back home, don't do that. But yeah, so it is, we don't really have very recent experiences, because that's still hundreds of years ago. And it's also one thing that is complicating that as well is Columbus's journal. There are second degree reference, not copies of it, but records of it, where it had made it back to Europe, and it had been shared somewhat, and some people wrote their own books on it, wrote their own records of it, but the original and the copies of the original have been lost. But some of the things written about it have at least survived long enough for then other books to be written. So it's like we do have records, but the chain of custody is not the strongest. Anyway, but yeah, so just I don't. You wouldn't approach them. You wouldn't approach even humans and be like talking about what the digits of pi are. That's going to be meaningless to them. I mean, yeah. You would start with something that you have in common and you know the other person is going to be familiar with. So, I mean, it's like going back, Fibonacci sequence. You would expect an intelligent species, intelligent people to recognize that, and it's something basic enough that you should be able to express safely. But still you do that, and it's just like, okay, we know we're trying to communicate here. What do you do next? And anyway, moving on, because I could probably keep going on that. So the actual entry into the cloud was even more spectacular than the approach. At the last instant, it appeared so filled with brilliant patterned color that they seemed to be plunging headlong into a giant star. The brilliant patterned color we're going to be coming back to in a moment. But plunging headlong into a giant star. This is another one of those scale things. I think most people don't really understand how bright a star is, including the sun. It is very frickin' bright, okay? Such that, I mean, think you can have clouds in between you and the sun. Clouds that are very thick, but you can still see pretty well, even. I mean, it's just reflections of sunlight. Even off the moon can still illuminate well enough to see with your naked eye. And you're talking about, oh yeah, it looks like, a giant star. It's like, okay, that is so bright, it should potentially be burning things off of the surface of the Enterprise. Like, traditionally we see it as NCC 1701 USS Enterprise is written on there. I would kind of expect that to have been burned off. Like, you are sun bleaching the outside of the Enterprise. So, but as I said, that's if I take it to be literal, and I think we shouldn't. That it is, as that just not understanding the scale of what's involved here, just how freakishly bright that would have to be. Especially because you're talking about diving in. Imagine doing that to the sun, which is not a giant star. It would be quite small compared to what this is. But it would, I would absolutely believe that would bleach away anything on the surface of the Enterprise. It would also eliminate the Enterprise, but that's a different story. Yeah, I'm talking just about, well, even though light might be very powerful. Not sure about that, but it's ignoring the heat. It's, yeah. More description of, well, Kirk describes it, because there was like a sensation when crossing the cloud, crossing into it. Wow, I've already gone that long. Anyway, that it reminded him of like entering the water after a good dive, and then even describes it that it seems like the Enterprise is riding on a wave. Okay. So it's actually funny. There is one thing that I mentioned that I wrote in my notes here that I find odd, but it does get brought up later. There's been no mention of contacting Starfleet. None to say we've encountered the intruder. None to say we've survived the encounter because apparently wants transmissions at this terahertz frequency. So I would say that both those would be very important information to share. And also then we are entering the cloud. All of those are transmissions you would be sending back. There's been no mention of any communication back to Starfleet at this point. So it's not like, oh, well, we just are to assume that they're doing... No. There's been no setup for that. I throw that out. Which also reminds me, sometimes I see that reference for some stuff like some anime, that you're just to assume that, like, certain high-speed movements, that's just how whatever you're watching or whatever you're reading, if it's the manga, you're just to assume that that's being used. It's like, while in some ways I can understand that, I also really dislike that. It's just, oh, well, they're constantly using it. Because, like, why would you constantly use that? I mean, if those moves are not passive, they are active to use. I don't know why you would use them all the time. You'd use them when they're most appropriate. So, yeah, yeah. Plus, I feel another issue is it potentially causes some feats to be less impressive. Because it's like, oh, well, you're just operating at this level. It's like, well, no, maybe it's operating a different way. So, sure, why not just give the example? I think, yes, I mentioned in other things, I enjoy the anime and manga Bleach. There's a scene towards the end of the first arc, and in my opinion, the first arc is the best of them. And in part because of pretty clear power scaling. But anyway, there's a scene where the main character, Ichigo, has used what's called Flash Step. That's the high-speed movement that he and other beings called Soul Reapers use. He's currently in opposition to them. It's a thing. And I do recommend reading it or watching it if you can. Hulu is streaming it, by the way. He uses this to get to this position, and there are 3 persons that are going after him. Well, going after an ally of his. He's going to be there to stop them. And this, I know this is not what I've seen other people describe the moment as being, but I disagree with it. I have some reason for it. And just to help explain why I think you shouldn't just assume passively a high-speed movement is always being used here, because I think you can interpret the event that I'm about to describe here differently that actually demonstrates Ichigo being far more powerful than he would be otherwise. And this is why I said you don't want to just be passive. So he's standing there. By the way, the whole thing in Bleach is their use of swords, right? And they can transform, things like that, whatever. He actually puts his down. He just stabs it into the ground, leaves it there, while these 3, who are described as lieutenants, so they are powerful individuals, are charging at him using Flash Step. As they approach, he then leaps forward, strikes one that their swords can transform. This one guy, his transforms into like a spiked ball on a chain. Ichigo leaps forward, punches it with his bare hand, basically just punches it, shatters the ball, then turns, hits the next guy, who they even show him, like, all he can do is just his eyes reacting. Then he hits the third one. So all 3 are actually in the air, still falling down after he has struck them, because he is moving so quickly. And then a captain, so one of the legitimately most powerful people there, runs up with his Flash Step to actually attack, and at this, Ichigo grabs his sword, because he does need it against that guy. I prefer to interpret it as this, not that Ichigo used a Flash Step there, but that he instead was actually, that was like his battle speed. And the reason why I say it like that is previously, like when the Flash Step was first introduced in the series, a point was made that this specific captain that just came at him combines that he uses. It's a special move for him to combine up the Flash Step with an attack, and I find that important. And why I said battle speed, because it makes it sound like Flash Step is actually used for travel. It's not supposed to be used for offense, not usually anyway. At a high level, you can, but not always. Ichigo, yes, he is supposed to be at a high level, but because he attacks, I think it's actually indicating that he is just moving that quickly. It's not that he is using this special technique. But yeah, he is able to counter the Flash stepping captain who is at a high enough level. He does attack, but it's just that whole kind of passive thing. No, I don't think you should just assume it to always be the case. Even in this, you should not assume, especially because there's been no setup, that they are trying to always be in communication with Starfleet about this. If it isn't stated, you shouldn't be doing that, because it then does open up, like in this case, well, so what I just described, it would put Ichigo at a much higher level. If he is not using Flash Step, he just moves that quickly. In this, it would indicate if they've actually not been trying to maintain this communication, which I have no reason to believe they have been, then that would indicate a foolishness of Kirk's, that he has never even given that order to our knowledge. He's never given the order to Uhura, this is what you need to be doing. Okay? And it's not like a mention, and this is what it could be doing. For her, as we are approaching, every hour you need to send a copy of our logs to Starfleet. But then they are actually there. It's like, we can see them. For her, make that every 15 minutes. Or, hey, we're getting really close. Send it now, and every 5 minutes after that. You could do that. Because that would actually, it makes sense because he's giving the order, but it's also then, you are building up the tension there. You're not having to say tension, but rather it is building up because, like, do it every 5 minutes. Do it every 2 minutes. Do it every one. For her, just keep an open channel. Literally, just be constantly broadcasting everything, okay? Just keep doing that. And even like, before entering the cloud, even have it be for her, drop a buoy that is going, that marks it and has a copy of our logs, but also have it where I want you to be able to send the signal to that and it will beam it back to Earth. Because we might lose signal with Earth, but maybe that thing will still. It's like, you can do that, and that is building up tension, because it's like, we are preparing for this because we might lose, and hey, you know what? Maybe that information, that might save them. Like, you're recognizing we might fail, but in our failure, there might be enough. So you should do that. That helps build up the tension because of recognizing the seriousness of the situation, and that, hey, we need to increase this because we don't want to miss the opportunity for that information to get through. It's like, that would be a way to do it. But nope, missed opportunity. And if it is never brought up, I mean, I would be tempted to bring this up later. As a Kirk, you should have been doing that. You were not following procedure, whatever. You are, in fact, not as competent as you need to be. But Decker has also not brought it up, so it's not that you can throw that, like, have it be a way for Decker to say that he should be leaving. But it's still, I hope you gain my point. Whew. Yeah, 22 minutes, I can believe it. But what I a little later heard us say, yeah, we can't transmit out of the cloud anymore, and Kirk's like, okay, send a messenger drone, which is a little bit of a problem just because there's no mention, like, the whole the intruder hopefully won't take that to be a threat, won't react to it, and no one brings up that the whole that could be a thing, that could be an issue. So it's like they're doing all the stuff to avoid this, and it's like, yeah, just drop this hunk of space junk out of the rear, and hopefully it doesn't react. It's like, dude, seriously? Especially when you consider it is going to be broadcasting. So it's like, you've been trying to keep down all these transmissions. That thing is legitimately just going to do that. You released it specifically to do that. Yeah, if Vidra's going to have a problem, it'll have a problem with that. So then there's the question, because they're now inside of it. Decker asks, are you still convinced the cloud is a power field? There's no longer any doubt of that. Even assuming the possibility of a power field this large, challenged Decker, it still doesn't explain what makes it visible. That's fair. That's fair. Energy you typically don't consider as being visible in that way. I'm saying, you don't see light. You see it scattering from things. The annihilation of hydrogen atoms. Okay. No. I'm sorry. It's just... And it continues to use that language of the annihilation of hydrogen atoms. It's like, annihilation is the complete destruction of, the removal of something. I have no reason to believe that Vidra is capable of doing that. Okay? Because hydrogen atoms, in this case, would be proton and electron, or proton, neutron, and electron if we're allowing deuterium there. We can assume that it's present. Might also be molecular hydrogen, which is actually two hydrogen atoms bound together. That I'm actually not sure what it would mostly be in space. Hydrogen wants to bind to things, so it typically will bind to itself. But in space, it is possible that it isn't always near enough for it to bind like that. Anyway, no, it should not be the annihilation of hydrogen atoms. Now, and it also, to be clear, they're talking about just the hydrogen that's in space. That's like, as Vidra is moving, its power field is having this effect on the hydrogen around it. Okay, it shouldn't be the annihilation. If it were the ionization, that'd be good with. Excuse me. Like the idea that the hydrogen atom is absorbing the energy and the electron is going, but now you've got a proton there, and there's also a bunch of free electrons, and occasionally a free electron connects with it. So it falls down, and in energy levels, and when it does that, it releases light. Very common occurrence, definitely something that could be happening here. I'd be fine with that. That makes sense for why you could see it. It's not a scattering of light, it is the spontaneous emission of light from the energy of the field being converted to optical energy through the mechanism of hydrogen being ionized and oxidized. Right? Hang on. It would technically be a redox reaction, wouldn't it? That's just... I'm trying... It has been too many years since I did electrochemistry. But anyway. So that would make sense. Just the... Nah, it's just being annihilated. That I don't care so much for. Plus, it also makes you wonder if this power field is strong enough to cause matter to cease to exist, to be annihilated. The hell are doing to the Enterprise? I mean, unless you're saying that the force fields, that the shields are actually keeping that out, which I don't know why we could assume that. It should be annihilating the Enterprise just by it existing there. That messenger probe too. So it's like, this really doesn't make sense. Even the ionization would be an issue. But I could believe, I'm okay with believing that the Enterprise has some means of capturing energy that builds up on the hull and putting that to something. Storing it, venting it, whatever, so that basically the ship is grounded. I can believe that exists, and would then protect itself. I'd be okay with that. That's not what's described here. There's also, in the whole, with brilliant patterned color, it's like, okay, the light is being emitted by what you're talking about, just free hydrogen having something happen to it. Where's the patterns coming? Where are the patterns coming from then? And I think it was even described as geometric patterns previously. That's order. This stuff should not be ordered. Well, not in that way. Technically, chaos is kind of order. That can be a discussion for another time. Yeah, chaos in physics, very different from chaos in English. Sorry, but it's kind of thing, and it's very interesting. But in any case, it still is. Maybe I'll talk about that when we get to Voyage Home, because there's something about that technically relates to time travel. But anyway, yeah, just fun stuff. Anyway, you can't have both of these things. So where are these patterns coming from? You do need to explain them, and there isn't an explanation here. Now, if it was something like it is ionizing, but that the field itself has these patterns in it, how you would explain the geometric patterns that were mentioned, that I believe I mentioned earlier. Not sure. I mean, if it were just patterned, like, oh yeah, over here we're getting a bunch of reds, over there we're getting greens. It's like, okay, that's one thing, but I'm pretty sure it was saying geometric patterns very early on, like back to Epsilon 9. Maybe even the original stuff with the Klingon cruisers. Either way, if you see a hexagon illuminating in space, I need an explanation for that. I'm sorry, but I do need that. So, yeah, I'm annoyed by that. To help give an idea of how powerful it is, Chekhov asked, are you suggesting it could be a fleet of vessels, Mr. Spock, because of how much power is there? Perhaps even an armada, Spock answered. Which, I mean, yeah, that makes some sense. But I also just find it a little funny, just because it makes you think of Star Wars, that not even the entire Imperial fleet has enough power to destroy a planet. V'ger can. And it's like it could be an entire armada. Technically, power scaling Star Trek does beat Star Wars, because even in the pilot for Star Trek, it is referenced that the Enterprise has enough power to destroy a planet. So a single starship has Death Star level power. And the starships only get more powerful after that. What's next? Okay, as they approach, they find that the cloud is thin, holes open up, and they can see through. And it's like, one time that happens, Sulu immediately goes, because it then gets blocked against. But he was reacting, the way he describes it is as though a airplane pilot reacting to suddenly just seeing a mountain in front of them, like, oh crap. But then it's like, okay, it gets blocked, so it's like, did I see what I thought I saw? Yeah, he did. And eventually they find that they are approaching on a oblate spheroid that is 78 kilometers long, which is rather large. But I find it interesting that it states an oblate spheroid, because that's the shape of the Earth. The Earth is not quite a sphere, it's a spheroid, and it's not quite a sphere because it's rotating. So we do actually, it's a little bit wider at the equator than at the poles. Nothing too surprising there, but it's like, this is suggesting it is akin to a planet or a moon. Not a very large moon, 70 kilometers, but still, it's that. As they are looking at it, Spock goes into meditation, hoping to contact the consciousness. Decker says something odd. Estimated at 257 times our length, okay, its displacement calculates at about 6 million times larger than this. Okay, why are you talking about displacement? I mean, I understand displacement for a Navy vessel because it's displacing water. You're a spaceship. You don't displace space. And I get the whole, well, maybe it's just, Starfleet is so descended from Navy tradition. It's like, okay, but we're centuries away from naval tradition that it would have been. That would have directly followed. I kind of think they would have changed that. Say the ranks being the same, that makes sense. But and some of the ship classes, like I talked about in one of the previous ones, what a cruiser is, battleship, destroyer, that makes sense. But to still talk about displacement instead of volume, that seems odd. Yeah, because it's like there is no displacement going on, and it's also this is I'm just unsure, because technically a Navy ship's displacement is less than its total volume, right? Because it's how much water does it displace, but that's also a measure of its mass, because it should be it displaces an equal amount of mass, but it needs that to be a lower volume of water than the total volume of the ship. That's how it floats. So again, it's just a displacement makes sense for a Navy ship. It doesn't make sense for a spaceship. Yeah, and it's also if it's displacement, and if it is displacement of water, which should actually tell you about the mass. Why are you talking about the mass of this thing? You don't necessarily know what it's made of. So yeah, and that actually comes to the next thing. That looking at the surface of this object, they had no idea what it is. The complexity of its surface was as incredible as its gigantic size. Kirk wondered if some of what he was seeing could be solid sheets of subatomic particles. At another place, the surface seemed to be walls of energy. Yet how could energy act like matter? I don't know. Ask somebody in your brig. Seriously, you have shields. You have force fields that clearly physically repel people that bounce into them. Okay, that's how those shields work. I mean, it's not just, ooh, that hurt. Because if that were the case, then it's I used to want, I'll just take the pain and charge through. Or even you get a running start and just leap. So it doesn't matter what the pain is, you can't recoil because you're not in contact with anything to come back off of. So yeah, guess what? Energy acting as matter, in this case, just as force, as a wall, you already got that. Kind of achieved. The idea of a surface seemed to be solid sheets of subatomic particles. Okay, well, a solid sheet of electrons. Actually, I'm not sure that would even make sense, because electrons are elementary particles and technically singularities. But it still is, ignoring that. Electrons and protons are not elementary particles. They are made of small things, so they actually do have a size to them. These are both charged, such that they don't want to be near each other. How do you explain them being near each other? That you could have something solid. And it's also like, this is something that you would notice a massive electromagnetic field from this if that were the case. And if it is they're both there together, then it's like, okay, so they're atoms or molecules that we're talking about now. Or you could be like, oh, well, subatomic particles, that includes neutrons. Neutrons do actually have a charge. It's very small, but they do have them. But let's go and say, oh, it's neutrons. Okay, so you're talking about the surface of a neutron star then. You wouldn't describe that as subatomic particles. Yeah. Yeah, I do not like that description. Decker has a different one in the next paragraph that I like a little bit better, but is also a little bit of an issue. But this is one of those old things where it's like, okay, I can actually tell you I can give an example of real matter that we have made, that we in fact use in some things, like our consumer products using this, that match kind of what Decker was describing here. Was he seeing coherent matter? I'll come back to that, because that concept there, I could see being an actual science fiction concept, or theoretical scientific concept. It was barely a possibility in some scientists' minds. It might be possible for a very highly advanced technology to organize matter in parallel, disciplined sheets to become thousands or perhaps millions of times stronger than any ordinary substance. The idea of, it'll become so much stronger just because it's ordered, I don't necessarily like that. I can understand the idea of a monofilament being stronger than something that's spliced together, because at the splicing, there's points where it could be weak. I'm okay with that. I understand that idea. But the idea that a single monofilament thing would be stronger than, say, multiple things that are spliced, that are all wound together and have splices, that I find kind of absurd. It's like, why would you think that a rope that consists of a large number of fibers, spliced or not, would not survive as well as a monofilament? I mean, if you control for what the specific element is being used, I feel like the rope would have to win. Anyway, splices or not in there. But the idea of just organized matter in parallel disciplined sheets, we got that. That would be, I think, coming up, and I don't know if it's quite 20 years old now, but it's getting there, graphene, which is pure carbon. It is one of carbon's allotropes. Word of the day, allotrope, ALLOTROPE. Kind of like isotope, sorry. Is it allotope or allotrope? I think it has the R. I might be wrong. Sorry. An allotrope is, I'm going to keep saying with the R because I'm pretty sure that's right, is a form of an element. It is the same element, but in a different molecular configuration. So carbon has graphite and diamond as two examples. Diamond is cubic. Graphite, a single piece of graphite we actually have like a benzene loop in there where it's 6 carbon atoms that form together in a hexagon. But in graphite, it's just a bunch of those, but they're all kind of random. They're oriented however. Graphene, it is actually all oriented. It looks like just chicken wire. Okay, in a single sheet, we can't have single sheets of this. It is just straight, flat. It's a atom thick. Okay, it is considered a two-dimensional material. My tongue wanted to keep skipping a syllable there. But it can be a single layer, so two-dimensional material. And that is basically what it's describing here. And yes, it is actually very strong. I'm not sure if it's necessarily because of that. I mean, yeah, I guess it would be. Well, within any piece of graphene, because you have molecular bonds, strong molecular bonds between all of it, that yes, that makes sense, it's held together. Whereas graphite is pretty soft, but you don't necessarily have a lot of those molecular bonds going around. It's more just a physical bonding. In any case, but yeah, and it's a fascinating material, and we do have other two-dimensional materials where it is like a single atom, or in some cases mixtures of atoms. There's also something called white graphene, which is boron nitride, and it's very interesting because Also has the hexagonal shape, but is boron and nitrogen. But it's also, while graphene has a bunch of weird properties. Graphene is a conductor. Boron nitride is a semiconductor. It's really neat. But yeah, one thing with graphene, and it's like this video is already long. Why not let it be a little longer? So, okay. The way electrons are within a material, typically there's a certain shape concerning the relationship between energy and velocity, right? And it's relativistic, where as the speed increases, the energy starts tapering off because it's relativistic. You can't approach the speed of light, okay? Because it gets more and more expensive to continue to go faster and faster. Not graphene. Well, I mean, yes, it's not going to allow you to go to the speed of light, but it has what's called a Dirac cone to this shape. So it's actually linear. The electron mobility in graphene, so how quickly can electrons move in that, is ridiculous. They want to use this for so many different things, and that's part of the reason why it is so very highly conductive, because electrons will just go very fast. And to help put that in context, and this may sound weird, but it is true, the electron mobility for copper, this wonderful conductor, it's actually really low. Yeah, it's actually really low. What is happening in copper that you seem to have electricity move quickly along it, it's not that an electron comes in here, comes in here and then exits, like entrance and exit. It's not the same electron. No, it comes in, knocks this one. It just keeps knocking the electrons to carry the energy forward, like a giant Newton's cradle. Well, giant in that a lot of them, but technically very small, since it's nanoscopic. But still, it's, that's what's actually going on there. But a single electron actually doesn't move that fast in copper. But is that knocking effect? Graphene, nope, it's moving that fast. It's awesome. I love graphene. It's so cool. And it really is, like, this has got to be a science fiction material. But as that there are actually consumer materials that use it. Like, is it Team Group or Patriot? I don't remember now. But there is one memory manufacturer that you can actually get a NVMe SSD, an M.2 SSD, that uses graphene in the heatsink. By and large, this isn't always true, but it more often than not is. High electrical conductivity also means high thermal conductivity, so it does help dissipate the heat. And there's other weird things with graphene, because, so you've got the chicken wire, right, and one layer. Typically, yes, it's used in multiple layers, but here's where it gets weird. So you could have it parallel, like what Decco's describing there, but if you offset it by just a few degrees, suddenly the graphene becomes a superconductor. It's like, the hell is this? I'm not sure if they figured out why that happens yet. I know it's been studied, so it's possible they have figured it out. I'm just not remembering, but yeah, that's a thing. And it's like, okay, if that happens at this angle, what happens at this angle, at this angle? It's wild. It is wild. But yeah, so coming back a bit to the whole concept of coherent matter. I don't necessarily think of graphene as coherent matter per se, but the idea coherence to me brings to mind the idea of like the wave functions line up, which again, there are things that we have that are that. We don't use them for anything outside of labs, called Bose-Einstein condensates. And these things are pretty wild. And by the way, helium sufficiently cooled will actually act as one, liquid helium. And that is where, even though you might have a mass of it this large, the whole thing acts as though it's a single particle. Okay, it's really neat, and there's various experiments where this is perfect, because you can then do something and see the effect over a much larger area, because everything is, you can think of it, it's not quite this, as though it is quantum entanglement throughout the entire mass, that all the particles are connected to each other in that way. But they are coherent. It's a single wave function for the whole thing. It's awesome. So, yeah, but it's like, those things do exist. It's not barely a possibility in some scientists' minds. But if he is talking about just more so the idea of engineered materials at the molecular level so that you can then assemble structures with specialized properties. That I get, and that I can understand being described as coherent matter because of how you've assembled it. Technically, that's not in like waveform coherence, but it's still, I could see that being described that way, being labeled that. And technically, we have that capability, but not on the scale that would be here. But no, there are deposition methods that we have. So means to deposit atoms. Typically, it's large number. But I'm pretty sure we do have ways that we can actually make sure that, like with graphene, that it builds up in a very controlled manner and the atoms are going where we want to go. But that's like in a laboratory making samples that might not even be that big, okay? Yeah, so it's... Yeah. It is still kind of science fiction, the idea. If that's what you're talking about, technically we have that capability today, not on that scale. On that scale, that's pure science fiction. It's awesome. It's awesome. And it kind of goes back to that one video. That I was mostly talking about alloys, but still is the idea of, because I don't like the idea of, oh yeah, we'll just titanium. That's a new element. It's like, no, there's no spot on the periodic table for it. Just make it an alloy. Was like that. I mean, you could also have design materials where you are assembling them to provide specific properties. That's reasonable as a science fiction concept that can be achieved, can be explained. And in some ways, I work with metamaterials where we are trying to create materials that have specific, in that case, electromagnetic properties, so like special indices of refraction. That's really neat. I'm not sure where we are with that. I know we've got them in microwaves. I don't know if we've gotten to higher frequencies yet, but anyway. Which one is this? Okay, I need to start checking. And I also try to speed up. Yeah, I'll mention that anyway. Just, it is curious how nothing has been mentioned about, the center seat has these new braces for holding Kirk steady, but they've been attacked and there's been no mention about this. I mean, are they going to come up at all? Was it just dropped as a, yeah, I think it's a neat thing that'll be there, but I'm never going to use it. It's like, I get that, but I'd edit it out. Unless it is going to serve a purpose. Like, even if it were just like Barf in the start of Spaceballs, where Kirk tries to get up and it's like, oh crap, I forgot about those things. Release. Even if it were just something like that, that'd be fine. But we've got nothing with them, and maybe it's still to come. Don't know. Because it's just, if you wanted it to be an example of him still not really knowing what he's doing, it's like, okay, that's fine. I get the idea. Go with that. But can we do it in a way that then comes up later? They start a low-level scan of the surface of this planetoid. Let's just call it that for now. And Vija responds with its own probe that it's like scanning around the bridge, which is curious because it's doing this, and Kirk is just like, let it do its thing, even as it connects into the different consoles and is clearly like learning about the ship. It's like hooks into Uhura's communication console. Yeah, that's okay. Hooks into engineering. Yeah, that's okay. Hooks into defense. Check off. Just make sure you're out of the way. Comes over to science. Oh, it also connects into navigation. Comes over to the science console. It's like, oh crap, we gotta cut that off. And so Spock is like, boom, hits it because he can't manually cut it off. The reason given, it's like, yeah, but this is dumb. The reason given is because the Science Council has direct access to the main computer. Because apparently communication never uses the computer, engineering never uses the computer, defense never uses the computer, and navigation never uses the computer. It's just the Science Council that uses the computer. If somebody wants to try arguing that, well, that has like two-way connection or can access more of the computer than those other consoles, I'm not convinced of that, but it's like, okay, we still don't know the nature of this probe. We don't know what it is capable of. We don't know. I mean, yeah, we don't know what's capable of. How do you know that isn't connecting in? And just like, it doesn't matter that communications is only able to access one portion of the main computer, and science can, let's just say, connect to all of it, which I'm just guessing at. You don't know that it's not going to be like, well, I'm just going to read the whole computer anyway through this port. I mean, it I don't know why you would have this distinction here, aside from allowing Kirk to be like, don't interfere, we don't want to make it mad, to a, oh crap, interfere because we can't have it doing that. Oh, there's also in this, and okay. Alright, yeah, I'm just gonna. So, Spock does that. The probe reacts with a tendril towards him, which just brushes him and sends him flying. He's on the ground. Ilia moves. He lands by her. Ilia then moves to like try to draw its attention to her. Why you think this would work on a probe, I don't know. But in any case, that's what she does. She then gets enveloped by the probe and it just vanishes, which we do see in the movie. Okay, fine on its own. If that were it, fine. Except there was something that happened a moment before, which is two security guards. I don't remember this being in the movie. Two security guards come up and off of the turbo lift. They both draw their weapons, but one of them is painfully a bit faster, and the probe reacts by shooting him with one of the green whiplash things, and he vanishes. The security guard did nothing to interfere. All the security guard did was raise the phaser. Why the probe recognizes, oh, that thing's a weapon? I don't know. Why does it have that knowledge? It hadn't gotten to the Science Council yet. Did it read that out of the other things? Which would mean it had access to the main computer, which kind of goes back to the previous. Why does it know that's a weapon? Why does it think that that's a threat to it? It's like, oh, lethal force. It goes to that, and then the other security guard's like, put the gun back. He's also ordered to stand down, and Chekhov even says, no security come up to the bridge. Okay, don't do this. But Spock destroys the console it was connected to, so clearly interfering with it. And the thing reacts by first like slapping at him, that sends him flying, and then going towards him, failing, not hitting Spock, the thing that actually interfered with him, but hitting Ilia and just beams them away, and just beams her away with it. Why did it not react with the same attack to Spock as he did the security guard? Spock potentially just did more, actually interfered with it. As I said, there's no reason to believe that the security guard would be recognized as a threat, that the phaser would be recognized as a threat, because you'd have to understand what the phaser is. Which reminds me, what was it? That's right. In my criticism for Return of the Jedi, I think I had, I talked about it. Why would the Ewoks take their blasters and the lightsaber from Luke? Take Han's blaster, Chewie's bowcaster, and Luke's lightsaber. The Ewoks have no concept of what they are. Why would they know their weapons? Why would V'Ger know the phaser is a weapon either? No idea. So, yeah, but Spock's actions did interfere with it. So it's like, okay, he is a problem. So react, but why is it a lesser reaction? It's like this. It's one of those funny things where technically it makes more sense if the security guard never appeared. Or if the reaction to the security guard had also been a lash that just sent him flying instead of, and he disappears. And it is a disappear without the probe disappearing. Yeah, I'm just looking at the next chapter, but there's... Yeah. The probe enveloped Ilia, exploding into blinding white light again, and disappeared, taking Ilia with it. So, sorry, this is very annoying. So, yeah, it's a completely different reaction. And why? There's no cause for this to be its reaction. Why did it go to Ilea as well? Because it would be aware it's Spock that did the thing. Why would it make the mistake? Why wouldn't it be like, no, not Ilea, you, and just go around her? I mean, it's. I am expecting a logic. Well, yeah, I am expecting a logic to V'ger that is not being demonstrated here. And Spock has stated multiple times there is a logic here, and it is a logic far beyond anything I've ever encountered before. So it's like, it is a logic greater than Spock, and yet it is doing these things that there is no logical explanation for why it would behave this way, and then behaves this way, and then behaves this way. So yeah, as I said, to kind of tie this back around and hopefully stop before we actually hit a full hour, this chapter, I feel, could have used another editing pass to be like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. And that it isn't, I would write it differently. I would be making the point, like, if I were Roddenberry's editor for this, that it's like, why is the behavior different? And if he gives me an explanation, great, wonderful, write that down, put it in it. Right? Because if I'm asking the question, guess what? A reader is going to ask a question. And there's also further context here. I'm not sure when some of the fan fiction novels or licensed novels would have started to come out for Star Trek. But, well, yeah, even just the fact that the motion picture was being made was because Star Trek did in fact have a fan base. That's why they were trying to restart it. And in fact, the motion picture was in part intended to like launch a new television series. That didn't happen. They continued with the films instead. But it's like that's what they were hoping to do. So there was going to be great interest in there. I love Star Trek. I am a fan of Star Trek. I am not a super passionate fan of Star Trek. There are some people that if they were to watch this might be able to list off the books, even the specific pages and paragraph numbers telling me where the explanations for all this stuff are, okay? If I'm noticing that, hey, V'ger's acting illogically, but V'ger's supposed to be very logical, there's a problem. It's like, you do need to explain this. And it's, yeah. So, I would be writing some of this differently. Or at least, I would have to, if I wrote this, acknowledge, if anyone pointed out, yeah, you're right, there are problems there. If it's well after having written it, it'd be like, well, I can't do anything about that. Like, if it's already published, I can't do anything about that. Which actually reminds me, I think it's The Stars Like Dust. Isaac Asimov's story, where Asimov actually had a scene in there where he described something that later on he learned was untrue, and he actually there's like in the afterword in my copy of it, it even says, yeah, I wish I could correct that, but I can't because the scene is actually kind of important as is, so it just has to stand. The mistake was he at the time thought that carbon dioxide was necessary for human respiration, and so while a bunch of humans are on a planet with a reduced atmosphere, so it's like not all that habitable, they have canisters that are venting out carbon dioxide. So basically like canisters with like dry ice or something, so it's just they have the carbon dioxide to breathe in there. Now these canisters are actually important to the scene that's going on there, so that's why you can't really change them. In theory, I guess he maybe could have gone in and made it where it's oxygen, except pure oxygen is actually very scary. No, seriously, pure oxygen is scary shit. It will actually oxidize your body. You breathe in pure oxygen, it will kill you. Which is actually funny then because of how that relates to the discovery of nitrous oxide, but that's a whole nother thing. Oh, yeah, I mean, it's also liquid oxygen. Look up some of the videos on that. Sometimes you can look it up as LOX, LOX. There are some weird videos from the 70s talking about its danger because it's an organic solvent, so we'll just dissolve organic materials. But it can also allow things that normally cannot be ignited to be ignited. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, he couldn't. He apologized that he can't make that change because, like, well, I'd have to rewrite too much, and then the story itself may fall apart. So, yeah, how it is sometimes. But yeah, I would kind of maybe that's where I'd be stuck with if I would rewrite this and then want to rewrite the chapter. But yeah, it's still that I got issues. Anyway, see you next time in chapter 19.